Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have FCC to appoint a babysitter to make sure CBS isn't anti-Trump from Gizmodo.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the technology subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for CBS. I do think it's kind of biased against Trump. But regardless, I think the libertarian position is, if private media wants to be biased, they should be allowed to be biased. I think the libertarian position is, you shouldn't try and control private corporations or regulate them. If you don't like what they're doing, you're free to start your own corporation that does it your way rather than their way. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. Personally, I think CBS, ABC, NBC, all the broadcast TVs is just becoming like cable television, increasingly irrelevant. So I personally don't think Trump should be forcing his will on them. Just let them become increasingly irrelevant as people move on to podcasts and social media, rather than look like an authoritarian tyrant forcing your will on them. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have gay makeup artist Andre Hernandez Romero describes horrific sexual and physical abuse at CCOT in El Salvador from Advocate.com, posted by LegioX. And yeah, personally, I don't think, CCOT sounds like it was full of violent thugs, so I don't know how this guy ended up there. They always seem to find guys like this, or what was that other guy they were pushing for a while, and yeah, if they end up there accidentally, I don't know. Personally, I think CCOT's pretty much the worst of the worst. So, you had to do something bad to get up there, or maybe I think this guy might just be a crisis actor, just like that other guy they were pushing for a while. So we'll have to see. Yeah, personally, I don't think people should be forced into prisons like CCOT, but ultimately the state can justify sending people wherever they want to. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Personally, I think the libertarian position is, maybe private prisons rather than sending people to down across the border to El Salvador in government prisons. Or is CCOT private? I'll have to check. It might already be private. Central, here's max security. I think it's owned by their government, but the ideal libertarian perspective is private prisons rather than government-run prisons. That's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have under Trump, Paramount's merger deal must include a bias monitor. The company also has to agree to ditch its DEI programs. Posted by CH4Lux from MotherJones.com. That's a cross post from the Republican Values subreddit. And yeah, we already talked about that earlier with the first post. But yeah, as I said, I don't think I don't think they should be forced to have a bias monitor if they don't want to. I personally don't care for DEI programs. I think they're mostly just grift run by Reddit SJW circle jerkers, but ultimately, if they want to have them, they should be able to. The government shouldn't force them to not have or have whatever business they want to. And yeah, that's why I don't think the government should be the one approving corporate mergers, because that's why they're being forced to do this, because they had to just merge with Skydance, I think, recently. And yeah, that's why I think personally the libertarian position is maximum corporate freedom, so no government-approved mergers. They should just be able to merge with each other rather than have the government tell them who they can and can't merge with. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then next we have marching orders. They are receiving them, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross-post from the Facepalm subreddit. And that looks like a bunch of tweets from a bunch of MAGA influencer accounts. Eric Doherty, Bioclandestine, MAGA Voice, Brando Republic, MAGA Big Balls, Party Captured, Bjorn Lane, Kayleigh McEnany, and Team USA, and they all pretty much say the same thing. Just revealed President Trump's golf swing is being shown off in Scotland, and people are amazed that it's formed for somebody nearly 80 years old. Democrats have spent months trying to say he's not fit for office. And yeah, I don't really care for that. How it seems like a lot of MAGA influencers all read off the same script. But I'd say the same thing for a lot of progressive influencers. They read off the same script, but you'd never see that trend on Reddit, because, when the out-group does it, it's the worst thing ever, but when the in-group does it, it's completely fine, and questioning it is literally fascism. And yeah, that's why I personally don't take Reddit that seriously, because they should, I'm sure if Kamala was in office right now, Reddit would be talking about how great she was, like all these MAGA influencers doing with Trump. But since it's the bad orange man in office, he's the worst thing ever, and anyone who says anything remotely positive about him whatsoever is just a grifter, a racist, whatever other labels they can throw at you. Then we have, and this is what MAGA has finally come to, saying that raping young girls is okay, and that's posted by Donkey, and that's a tweet from Poker and Politics. MAGA has gone from kill your local pedophile to if the girl is 13, what is the big deal? And that was them quote tweeting rapper Azalea Banks, who said, okay, in Donald Trump's defense, fucking 14-year-old girls was really only made a social taboo in the 1990s. My grandmother was born in 1927 and had her first child when she was 12. Teenage pregnancy only became frowned upon after the rise of Jerry Springer, and I also can be honest about the fact that I was old enough to choose, seduce, and decide to go fuck grown-ass men when I was 15. I really don't get why women are fronting like they weren't fucking 40-year-olds at 15, like, come on now. I'm also not surprised they're mad for Trump getting some 15-year-old pussy, because those were the times. Good night, USA, for fucking ever. Don't feel fucking 10-year-old, we have a problem, but the girls are 13 plus, who cares, move on. And yeah, personally, Reddit's always gonna find like the worst argument anyone makes in regards to, and they'll say, oh, all of MAGA believes this, even if it's just one idiot posting it. And yeah, personally, I don't think, I think the age of consent is there for a reason. It's ultimately something that's going to be more subjective rather than objective. Also, I'll say that, but I do think, kids can't consent to sex, even if they are as old as 14. But, ultimately, I'm sure you can always find some idiot to disagree with you. It would be like, if going by what average Redditor says and say, oh, the whole Democratic Party believes this. Just because some idiot on social media believes it doesn't mean the whole party believes it. But on Reddit, just because one person says it means they all say it pretty much. And that's at least their logic, at least. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump is making socialism great again, posted by Lemon Limelight, and they said, from The Atlantic, growing numbers of Americans feel that the economy does not work for them. Donald Trump's stewardship has blatantly favored insiders and cronies, and so in the 2020s, Americans find themselves debating ideas that once seemed dead and dusty, and in some cases electing politicians who champion them. The new socialism addresses the problems that wrecked the old socialism only by denying or ignoring them. If socialism is to be beaten back, and if market economies are to uphold themselves in democratic competition, exposing the unworkability of proposed alternatives wouldn't be enough. It will be necessary to reform and cleanse the market economics indispensable by sustaining American standard of living. But don't look to Trump to reform and cleanse market economics. In fact, expect the opposite. Emphasis added. Trump vowed much more aggressive and intrusive government action to protect American businesses and workers from global competition. Trump is a putative billionaire whose business methods involved cheating customers and bilking suppliers. His private life was one scandal after another, and he spent his money on garish and gimcrack displays. He staffed his administration with plutocrats flagrantly disdainful of the travels of ordinary people and of grifters who like to live high on public expense. The progressive economist Joseph Stiglitz recently remarked, Trumponomics is ersatz capitalism. The president and those who around him are accumulating huge fortunes by unashamedly preying on the credibility of their followers. Trump insiders have used political power to harass regulatory agencies and cripple tax enforcement. Trump's big policy moves are accompanied by an avalanche of suspicious trades. While Trump's behavior describes markets, his rhetoric vilifies markets. In April, the Trump administration imposed the most crushing tariffs of international commerce since the Smoot-Hawley tax regime of 1930. MAGA's message is consistent. Free exchange is an illusion. There is nothing but exploitation. The only way to protect Americans from exploitation is for nations' political leaders to subject more and more of the U.S. economy to state control. If this way of thinking is true, then the serious critics of capitalism are right. Happily, this way of thinking is not true. Free exchange is a system of cooperation and mutual benefit. The most effective that humanity has yet discovered. But who is the Trump-led United States is arguing for the case for free exchange. The most influential intellectuals of the left reject markets as too inequitable. Those on the right reject them as too cosmopolitan. On one side, the professional politicians are impregnated by their most radical supporters. On the other, the politicians are under the sway of crooks and con artists whose idea of capitalism is unregulated permission to bilk and defraud. Marxists condemn capitalism as organized robbery. They cannot be more wrong, but who will refute them when the government of the world's largest capitalist democracy is in the hands of organized robbers? And I would pretty much agree with all that. Reddit, of course, wouldn't consider most Redditors, not this one. This is one of the exceptions. Most Redditors would consider Trump to be more of a fascist than a socialist. But the Nazis did call themselves National Socialists after all. So, personally, I think, both parties are rather socialistic at this point rather than capitalistic. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have the UK's Online Safety Act is a free speech nightmare, from freespeechunion.org, posted by LegioX. And yeah, I would agree with that. It's wild how much censorship is being pressed recently, between this and the whole Visa MasterCard situation in regards to NSFW content online. There's this one group saying, you can't, pretty much pushing them to say, you can't have your use your services on any sites that have NSFW content on that, and they're just finding a lot of censorship because of that. And yeah, personally, I think that censorship online is one of my biggest issues that libertarians should be fighting against. The libertarian position should be for a free and open internet, even if it's full of stuff that you disagree with. Because, ultimately, if they can censor one thing, they can censor anything. And yeah, some things that, I really wouldn't care for, like, maybe like snuff films or child pornography. I'd say keep that shit on the deep web. But, I don't think the libertarian position is one of censorship. I think the libertarian position is defending the indefensible as long as no one else gets hurt. So, ultimately, I think people should be able to make whatever they want to and not fear it being censored. But increasingly, the state is saying we gotta censor you, and private corporations are too, as I just mentioned earlier, Visa and Mastercard. So I think you gotta stand up to censorship, whether it be from the state or the corporation. And we gotta support freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which sadly looks like it's kind of on the way out these days. Which is why a big reason I do this podcast is I don't know how much longer I'm gonna have free speech for. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. And I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.